it here that I'm never sure if it works properly. Thank you very much. So let me thank our chair of convocation for the kind introduction. She's always so kind whenever she introduces me, and I'm forever grateful for the support that I've been receiving from convocation. They have made this very clear, and it's been such a pleasure up to this point, and I hope it continues. Very grateful. When I was asked to speak, soon after I arrived, they said, "Oh, would like you to come and speak at the summer school," and I was like, "Why?" And they sat me down and convinced me that I needed to do this. And obviously, at that point, I'm still concerned about the more immediate challenges that I was faced with at the time when I arrived. And they're like, "No, don't worry. By that time, you'll be ready." And I'm like, "I don't think so." But here I am, and I actually feel that this moment provides me with a great opportunity to reflect on the past 6 months. At the end of January, tomorrow, it will be marking 6 months since I took over office on the 1st of August. So it is an important milestone for me. And in terms of the topic that they've given me, I cannot say that I have figured it out yet. And I'm hoping that you can also help me to crystallize my thoughts around this. I'm going to try and share my thoughts over the next 25, 30 minutes, and then leave enough time for us to address any questions you may have, or thoughts that you may have, or suggestions that you may have. I also wanted to make sure that the talk that I'm giving is more of a conversation rather than a typical lecture. I don't see myself as an expert. I prefer to give a lecture where I'm considered an expert. If I was talking about public health and other things, I would give you a lecture, or implementation science. But on this one, I'd rather we have a conversation. And I should also just perhaps take this few seconds to welcome all of you. And I see so many friends in the room, and those that I've met already. Several of you have already been to my office to have conversations and exchange ideas and share thoughts. And if we haven't met, I'm looking forward to also meet you. Now, when I was first announced as the VC, one of the things that became very clear to me was that UCT has a much wider stakeholder group than I had imagined. I thought initially that the stakeholder group of UCT will constitute staff, students, parents, perhaps alumni, maybe some of the donors, and some of the key stakeholders like government and parliamentary members who have an interest or a direct stake in UCT. But I quickly realized during that time, a few weeks after my announcements, given the huge number of messages that I was getting from all sorts of people across the country that, in my view, had nothing really to do with UCT. And that was a surprise for me, because I didn't understand, and I kept asking them, "Okay, you're sending me this message, you're giving me a call. What's your interest in UCT?" What's your interest in UCT? And it became clear to me as I was talking to them that um, many of them can't even describe exactly what that interest is, but they know that they are interested. They follow what happens at UCT. They want to know. And at the time in my mind, I was thinking perhaps it's because, in the future, they would like their children or grandchildren to go to UCT. Could be true. But still, it stood out for me. And eventually, when I synthesized the sum total of the responses I was getting at the time, to me, it became clear that UCT represents a beacon of hope for a lot of people in the country. People that are not associated or affiliated with UCT. And this is one of the things that I communicated to my colleagues in management and senior leadership at UCT to say, you don't have to feel uncomfortable when you're getting hammered in the media. It's not a bad thing. It shows the interest that exists, the public interest that exists in this country around UCT. It doesn't quite happen in other institutions, and I've been at other institutions. I would often joke that in the university that I came from, students could burn a building and the news will go under the radar. No one knows. But here at UCT, if I sneeze, it's on the front page of the news. The vice-chancellor of UCT was seen sneezing. And you see it on those big pamphlets on main road. And for me, I asked my colleagues to just come to terms with this, to say that you must understand that, as they say, with great power and great influence comes great responsibility. So there is a lot of accountability that is expected of UCT. And even now, a lot of people are sending me messages. Oh, are you going to have a strike? Are you going to have a strike? Because if you are going to have a strike, then we must also prepare for a strike, which speaks to the trend-setting nature of UCT. Last week, I was also in Davos at the World Economic Forum, and there was a huge number of people that kept telling me their observations about what has been happening at UCT. They're speaking to the Vice-Chancellor of UCT, but they're telling me their views about what they have observed in terms of what's unfolding at UCT. In one instant, someone from the World Economic Forum told me how from January last year, she was checking every single month what the update is and what is it that UCT is deciding about its leadership. They wanted to know. Now, most of us, we are here at UCT, we often don't think about the great influence that UCT has, not just in this country, but in the world. Maybe you all do, but to me, it was an important lesson. And I start with this context so that I can frame what are my thoughts about where we go from here. I would like us to think about the legacy of UCT over the last 100 years, if you will, or 200 years. and then think about the future of UCT over the next 100 years. I know that I'm in my term of office for 5 years, but I'm also mindful that every decision that I make will echo into the future of UCT. Every decision that I make. And so I do feel the weight of having to make these decisions, wondering, thinking, and having to consider what are the possible implications for UCT 30 years from now and 50 years from now. I have taken the time since I've been here to reflect on some of the patterns that I observe at UCT today and where they come from, tracing them back over time. And it has been interesting to me to realize that some of the things that we see, some of the problems that we see, some of the good things that we see can be traced back to decisions that were made 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, perhaps even longer. Let me give you an example. During the time of Professor Stuart Saunders, one of the key decisions he made was to increase the diversity of students at UCT demographically, increase access for Black students into UCT. This was perhaps in the 1980s, but certainly in the early 90s, certainly at the turn of democracy. And even though I haven't had the opportunity to verify or confirm exactly when that was, my conversations with Mampela Rampela, who followed him, confirmed that her mandate was to focus on access and quality, which was meant to be a continuation of the policy decision that was made at that time. Now, a lot can be said about subsequent decisions that have happened since then, during Njabulo Ndebele's time, during Max Price's time, during Pakeng's time. But if you look at the data, it's very clear that the numbers of Black students at UCT have grown. In fact, in 2023, for the first time, the proportion of African, colored, and Indian students reached 55% for the first time at UCT. Now, when you trace the numbers, yes, you can see the concerted increase in the numbers from around 2014, which is about going back 10 years. And you might think that this pattern started 10 years ago. The most important decision that was made at that point, around that time, was to expand the total body of students at UCT from 22,000, around 22,000, which grew over time to what it is now, just around 29,000. And that decision was made because in as much as they wanted to accelerate the diversity of students at UCT, they did not want to take away spaces for the students that were already coming to UCT. Instead, they created more spaces. So when I look at it, it might look as though the pattern that we are seeing today, or that we observed in 2023 and in 2024, is something that is new, that was started now. But no, that pattern started a long time ago. Not only in 2014 or 2013, the policy decision goes back most probably to the 80s, but most certainly to early 90s. When I look at those patterns, I then ask myself, okay, if we are benefiting from the legacy of the decisions that were made nearly 30 years ago, what is the responsibility that we have today to make decisions that are going to benefit the generations that are going to be here 30 years from now? That is the question I ask myself. Because I would be lying to myself if I did not consider that the decision that I'm making today is going to echo into the future of UCT. If that is the case, then, if I accept that the decisions that I make have both short, perhaps medium term, but certainly long term ramifications for UCT, then how do I think about my strategy, my vision, my contribution to UCT in the 5-year term period that I have? How do I think about it? Because if I make decisions in such a way that, or in a way that makes me, that comes across as though these are just short, immediate, expedient decisions, then this would not be in the best interest of UCT. And sometimes when we are faced with challenges, crises, problems like I have faced in the last 6 months, it's tempting, it's very tempting to make decisions that are expedient. But I want to suggest to you that the future of UCT and its legacy is going to be protected by the resilience that we can demonstrate as the leadership of UCT, demonstrated in the decisions that we make that are also designed to endure for a long time. This is how I feel. This is what I think. Now, I benefit a lot from having conversations with people that have been here at UCT for a long time. I benefit a lot from people that are not affiliated to UCT who can provide external and outside perspectives. Just as I do, and I meet with a lot of stakeholders, I benefit a lot from young people at UCT, even the ones that are radical in the way that they want to change things at UCT. And I benefit a lot from colleagues who want to protect the status quo at UCT. Oftentimes we talk about issues of academic freedom. We have tensions around social justice. All of these things are things that we are facing, and I have faced in the last 6 months. There is a diversity of views. There is a diversity of opinions. But I often find that we are united in having the best interest of UCT, even if we disagree. And the best interest of UCT is also going to be its long-lasting legacy, not just up to this point, but also going into the future. And not the future in terms of the next 5 years, but the next 30 years, the next 50 years, and the next 100 years. It's going to outlive us, all of us, as it should. And we have to make decisions in a way that protects UCT beyond our time. So I want to propose to you that one of the things that UCT needs to deal with is the pain of the past, especially in the last 10 years, but perhaps longer. One of the common themes that I've come across again and again, talking to different people, can be summarized as pain. Now, we may not all agree on this, but what I am finding, and I'm seeing this as someone who has come from outside into UCT, I'm seeing that this pain makes it very difficult for us to unite UCT and look forward. It makes it very difficult. I have not even scratched the surface to see how deep it goes, how far it goes, who's affected in what way. I have not done that. But it's there. And if we are not going to find a way to have uncomfortable conversations at UCT, we will not be able to rise above this pain. And if we don't rise above this pain, we will be caught up in our past instead of looking towards the future of UCT. We focus so much on our differences instead of focusing on the things that we share in our interests here at UCT. And these differences contribute so much to the fractures and the polarization that we all are aware of. And anyone who is UCT, who cares about UCT, past, present, and future, there is no way that anyone would want to perpetuate these fractures. No one would want to do that. Because the success of UCT hinges on talent. Talent. The success of UCT hinges on talent. But talent is fragile. Talent moves. Talent is mobile. And if you create an intolerable environment, a toxic environment, a fractured, divided environment, an unbearable, an environment that is not conducive to the growth and fulfillment of your talent, then what's the point of being here? People will move. And when people leave UCT, they don't just go to Stellenbosch or Wits. No. They go to top universities in the world, both staff and students. And not just academic staff, even professional staff. So I don't see how we protect and nurture our talent at UCT if we do not create a psychologically and emotionally safe environment for them here at UCT. Everyone. I don't see how we do that if our diversity continues to be a weakness instead of a strength for us at UCT. And again, anyone who's got vested interest in seeing the success and future and sustainability of the legacy of UCT would not want to perpetuate fractures and polarization at UCT. Yes, we may not know exactly how to overcome our pain. We may not know exactly how to overcome our fractures and our polarization, but we're going to have to try. We're going to have to co-create processes, mechanisms for us to achieve this. And we have to do this not only for ourselves, not only for the generation that is here today, but to create a conducive environment even for generations that are yet to come to UCT in the future. We have that responsibility. We are benefiting today from a lot of work that generations before us have done and put into UCT to make it what UCT is. A lot of work has gone into it, and we also have to make sure that we put in the work to ensure that we are going to protect the legacy of UCT going forward and its future. We have to continue to attract the best talent. We have to retain the best talent at UCT. And the thing about talented people is that, and the thing about high functioning people is that they already put pressure on themselves. They already put a lot of pressure on themselves before you do anything. They put pressure on themselves to perform high, to excel. Then on top of that, because of our pursuit of excellence, we also put pressure on them. And if we put pressure on them, then we have a situation where people who are already putting pressure on themselves, they've got another layer of pressure on top of that to excel. And then we complicate it by creating a toxic environment for them. No. Then we're going to get surprised when we see incidents of mental health, people breaking down, people wanting to leave, suicide. Pressure that they put themselves and or the pressure we put on them for to achieve excellence, it's enough already. Let's focus on that. The rest of it, let's remove any other barrier to their success. Let's create a more conducive environment for them to succeed. And I'm talking about both staff and students. So complaints like bullying and discrimination and all of those things, those are completely unnecessary in an environment that is meant to nurture talent like UCT. You should not create space for those. We should just simply be kind and compassionate to our talent, with our talent. So then it makes no sense for me when someone comes to me, oh, I'm being mistreated and this and this and this. And oftentimes when you look, these are legitimate concerns. But I wish that together we can be intentional in creating a culture, an institutional culture at UCT that is conducive to nurturing talent, and that recognizes that people need to choose to come to UCT and to stay at UCT. And we need to be united in creating that environment. We can call it institutional culture, we can call it whatever we call it, as long as we understand it. To me, it's got values in it that are important. These are values of kindness, these are values of compassion, these are values of respect, these are values of empathy, these are values of Ubuntu. We have to be intentional in doing that. There must not be any room for discrimination or unfair treatment. Even when we disagree, we are a university, we're not always going to agree. Even when we disagree, let's disagree with respect. Let's still maintain that grace to respect the dignity of another person. There's no point in trying to humiliate someone to try and feel better about yourself. No point whatsoever. Especially in a place like this. So let me just try to tie my suggestions here by saying to you that I would like to see the community of UCT and all its stakeholders and all the people that have interest in UCT commit themselves to uniting UCT, even in its diversity, and to ensuring that we're creating a culture that is conducive for success, that is conducive for talent to thrive at UCT. And let us be clear about that. And anything that hinders those things, let's remove those barriers. If it means I'm going to have to use policies that I put in place, if I'm going to have to put disciplinary processes, if I'm going to have to put measures in place to protect that space, I will do that. Talent has to find a home here. Talent has to thrive at UCT. And this is how we protect the excellence in our performance as an institution. And this is how we continue to contribute to science, we contribute to the world and society. There are practical things that we have to do besides the academic project that we have to put front and center. We also have to deal with the business side of the university. I came into an environment where for 3 years, every year, we were in a budget deficit. 22, 23, 24. A big budget deficit ranging in the range of 200 and 300 million. And so when I walked in, the first thing that I was presented with was a budget proposal for 2025. And they were presenting a budget deficit of 306 million. And I said, no, that is not going to happen, because if you're going to be UCT, have to operate with a budget surplus so that you can use that surplus for innovation, to be at the cutting edge, buy the best new equipment, research infrastructure, get the best talent. You need that space. You need that measure. A deficit does not allow you to do that. And so I eventually, after many wrangling and debates and negotiations, we agreed on a budget, on a break-even budget. If we're not going to have a surplus, fine, but let's have a break-even budget. And that is the budget that was approved by council. So it is my hope that from this year onwards, the issue of budget deficit comes to an end. And the job that I have and my team has is to make sure that we can manage that budget so that we can stay within it. If we do, then we can start to create a little bit of a future for UCT that is built on that tradition of a budget surplus. We must not lose it. We have also had a problem of a growing debt at UCT, and this year we are going to focus our effort on reducing that debt. A top institution on the continent will not remain a top institution if it's got such financial difficulties. It's not possible. Because we are competing with institutions that are very well endowed globally. For talent, for impact, for science, for resources, all of it, we compete with them. And we've got to make sure that even UCT, with its constraints of being a public institution, still is able to build a healthy financial status for itself. And so you will see some of the decisions that I make that reflect my commitment to ensuring a healthy financial status for UCT. Some of my colleagues may not like some of them, but we may have to just live with them so that we get out of the financial hole that we are in. The last thing that I just want to mention is that we have to think long term. We've got Vision 2030 that finishes in 5 years' time. I have committed to turning that vision into a proper strategy for the next 5 years, 2026 to 2030. Having an implementation plan that is linked to that strategy. Having a monitoring and evaluation plan of the strategy and the plan that we have. But I want more than that. I want us to develop a framework or a roadmap for UCT for the next 25 years, 2026 to 2050. We have to have a roadmap of how we are going to get UCT from where it is and start to craft a vision of where we would like the university to be in 2050. And for me, that is an intentional step and action to force myself and my colleagues to think about the sustainability of the institution beyond this 5-year period that we are so focused on. I want to force us to break out of just short-term thinking to start thinking long-term. I'm not asking them for a 50-year plan, just 25 years. And I'm not asking them for a 100-year plan. And that roadmap, that framework, will force all of us to think about how to protect UCT beyond our own time. And a large part of that links to what we have to do as UCT to think about what is going to be the next exciting mission of UCT. There was a time UCT was just a teaching institution, and it had a teaching mission. Then UCT adopted a research mission, and it became really excellent and at the cutting edge by doing that. In the last 30 years or so, UCT has accepted a societal mission and has worked hard to try and bring itself much closer to society, be less of an ivory tower, and be more accessible. And as I said, some of these decisions were made back in the 80s and the early 90s. But we have to think now what the fourth mission is going to be. Already, colleagues are sharing ideas on what that could be, but it does look like it may be something around innovation and entrepreneurship. I'm not sure yet, but I'm throwing it out there for you to consider. But we're gonna have to articulate the fourth mission of UCT. It doesn't mean that we move away from all the other strengths that we have built over the last 100 years, but we are going to be building on top of them for greater impact in society and for greater relevance of the institution. Let me stop there and hear if you've got any reflections and thoughts. Thank you very much.
Jabula, and I'm going to ask, we're asking for questions. I'll point to who is going to ask the question, and they will take the microphone. First question. That one there.
One suggestion I have is that UCT avoids the mistakes made by American universities where you find a dominant way of thinking, often based on, well, I think we all know the concept of critical theory. Based on the critical theory philosophy, there's a dominant school of thought that oppresses and will not listen to other points of view. So it's just going back to the fundamentals of a university, freedom of thought. What you're finding in some universities now is freedom from thought.
I can take a few, and then let's take a few.
Take three.
Thanks. But like you, I'm kind of, I like the fact about innovation and entrepreneurship. And what I would ask is that you do entrepreneurship in a way in which it's going to create jobs and deal with the social issues that we have facing our country and our continent and our town. one of your predecessors said the sign of an unemployed graduate is a sign of failure by the university. Thanks.
Vice-Chancellor, could you tell us, in relation to the financial issues, as regards the budget, what were the final targets for increasing revenue and reducing expenditure? And on the capital account, what were the final targets for capital introduction in order to reduce debt? Thanks very much. And thank you for a lovely speech.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think, thank you for your comment. I do appreciate it, and I note your concerns around critical theory, and I think although we look to American university, their context, history, and trajectory is different to ours. And we always have to, yes, learn lessons, but as we learn, also be critical so that we don't just take whatever we see in the world and adopt without relevance to our context. Academic freedom is very interesting to me as a central pillar of UCT. At this university, we still celebrate T.B. Davy with the memorial lecture that we hold here at UCT, who was vice-chancellor at the time of the introduction of apartheid. And they fought very hard to push back against the policies that were being imposed by the government of the time on universities, to a point where UCT ended up getting the nickname of Little Moscow on the Hill. I don't know if you want to be associated with Moscow today, but what it did do, though, was helped UCT consolidate its stand to say that as a university, we want the freedom to decide who we bring here as students. We want the freedom to decide who we bring here to teach. We want the freedom to decide what we teach and how we teach. It consolidated this idea of academic freedom tied to what we now understand as institutional autonomy. And that institutional autonomy is still protected in the law that helps universities to exist, the Higher Education Act. So there's a very strong and a rich history of academic freedom in this university. The same thing happened even during the time of Stuart Saunders as well. Again, pushing against some of the pressures that were coming from government. Academic freedom and institutional autonomy have protected and helped the university to be resilient over a century. there is no way that UCT should and could take academic freedom for granted. Must never happen. Now, what I found interesting coming to UCT was that the notion of academic freedom somehow was positioned to come across as though it exists in conflict with social justice. Now, that did not make sense to me. Where I come from, there is no conflict between academic freedom and social justice. Did not make sense to me. And if you think about the things that Stuart Saunders was fighting for and what T.B. Davie was fighting for, that is inherently social justice. Now, if academic freedom emerges and grows out of social justice and for social justice at UCT, how can academic freedom now, today, be deemed to be in conflict with social justice? Make that make sense to me. Because today, that is the conflict. It's as if those who stand for social justice are in conflict with those who stand for academic freedom. And then when I say UCT tends to create unnecessary problems for itself, people don't understand what I mean. And this is the kind of thing that I mean. We cannot have a situation whereby our history in itself is very much rooted in the defense of social justice through the protection of academic freedom and institutional autonomy to now turn around today and start talking as if these things are in conflict. Then someone somewhere has misunderstood and they don't know what they're talking about. So it is my hope that even when we are thinking about protecting academic freedom and institutional autonomy at UCT, we don't misunderstand, and in fact, we don't forget the history that we come from as a university. Because if we don't protect that history, we are going to fail to protect academic freedom in the future. We are going to lose the resilience that we have had in the past that has brought us to where we are today. We will lose that. Yes, I agree that when it comes to innovation and entrepreneurship, we have to really embed it in our social realities. And this is what we are hoping to do, exactly what we are hoping to do, because we want to also bring industry much closer to the university. I'm really looking forward to a time when even our students can be embedded into industry early on. You know, the decision to bring in students from disadvantaged backgrounds and underprivileged backgrounds has also led to a situation where these students come into the university, they get top quality degrees and education, but they don't necessarily have the social capital that can help them to thrive in society. And so that shift should have been considered in that context, that actually we have to build a strong social network for our students who don't come in with a strong social capital into UCT. And this is why the alumni network becomes really important. But I think this is also why we have to bring industry much closer to UCT. And we are working on those kind of ideas. And hopefully, eventually, when they land, they can land somewhere where, as UCT, we will be very comfortable working very closely with not just government, but also with industry, very closely, with the private sector, very closely, and also just civic engagement. It'll be really helpful. I hope that we can land there. And I think what it will do is take us further from, where we were as an ivory tower and bring us much closer into the community, such that the idea of innovation, startups, and all of that can result in more immediate societal impact in the community. And this is the advantage of having talented people, that we could do that. So I think on the financial issues, yeah, I mean our biggest cost as UCT is staff. It is staff, and I can tell you that in the budget optimization that we are doing just for this year, we haven't even started to scratch the surface on how to optimize staff costs. To optimize staff costs is going to take us a few years, because it is something that has been happening slowly over time and growing over time to this point. And depending on what denominator you use, the thing is, we know that we are exceeding the target of 60% that we want to be at least when it comes to staff versus the broader operational budget. But my hope is that in the coming years, we can optimize that, bring it within the level that is acceptable. But as you said, what's really going to matter is revenue. We have to find new ways of bringing income into the university. This is also why we are leaning more on innovation. We've got opportunities for startups and companies that can help bring in income into the university, but we haven't optimized that space. If you look at countries, universities overseas that have turned around their situation and they're in a good place, they've managed to build that space of innovation and entrepreneurship, startup companies, and the university is able to earn passive income from those spaces. We've started doing that, but the amounts are still relatively small. And hopefully we can grow that revenue. The one thing that I think we're going to have to deal with is student debt. Student debt has been growing over time. At the moment, it's about 800-900 million. And we need to find a way of reducing it. And some of the decisions we have to make now have to make sure that we can slow the sort of rapid growth in that debt. And that's what we will be working on this year. I mean, last year I focused on just getting us to have a break-even budget operationally, but I think arresting that debt is going to be quite urgent, and then optimizing staff costs and also then increasing revenue will be important. Yeah.
It's now 2:00. We have a very busy vice-chancellor. So let us thank him for his very dignified and wonderful vision for the university. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Spirit you out the door. Yeah, to spirit you out the back door.